Hey, what's up everyone? Morey Croson here, and today we're going to be talking about what is more important, distance per step or turnover speed, and we'll start the video right now. This is the newest edition of the Performance Lab.
Reach your individual goals. You don't want to just talk about straight line speed. We also want to talk about your ability to be quick. We break down your video. Let's make you into the quarterback I know you can become.
All right, so I'm really excited about doing this video just because I just love talking about philosophy, right? Just love going into the science and, the nitty-gritty of being able to run faster. And I think this is going to be another great opportunity for you to be able to learn a little bit more about how you can improve your speed and what ends up being really important in being able to do so. We have two athletes here. One is working to be able to improve their 40. One is playing at the NFL level. They're about the same height. Athlete on the right is a little bit shorter, maybe by 2 inches, but at the most there. But big thing is how much distance per step was covered through the 40, right? So we have, Darrell Henderson, who ended up running 4.37, right? Ran 4.5 and then 4.37. And, on this run, right, when he ran the 4.37, he took 21 and a half steps, right? And then we have athlete on the right who took 25 steps. Right? So when we're looking at that, we just immediately think, okay, distance per step ends up being critical. And I do think at the end of the day, that is what the answer to the question is. That the distance per step is really what ends up separating athletes and making it so you could really be a faster athlete, right? Somebody that is able to go from point A to point B faster. The amount of distance that you're going to be able to pick up per step ends up being the critical determinant of whether you're going to do that at a very high level or average level or low level. And I'd love to hear what your comments are about this, by the way. You can go ahead and leave those down below. I'd love to be able to talk more about what you end up thinking ends up being the thing that separates people when it comes to speed. Now, there ends up being a big difference between the type of athlete, right? Because somebody that is 6'5", they're naturally going to be able to pick up more distance per step. So, turnover rate might end up being more of their priority, right? But that is because they already have the distance per step, right? So because you have the ability, or let's say we can assume that they're properly going through their running technique to be able to pick up a good amount of distance per step. For their size, for their 6'5" height or their 6'3" height or whatever the case may be. Now we want to be able to prioritize turnover speed, but that doesn't take away that their distance per step was still that key determining factor that made it so now we can focus on turnover speed, right? So priority number one, distance per step, then turnover speed. Right? And that's what I see, right, is that guys that are taller, they have a mechanical advantage or a advantage overall because they are able to naturally pick up more distance per step, where athletes that are shorter are naturally able to turn over faster, but that doesn't mean that they get from point A to point B very quickly, right? And so what we see here is, again, two athletes about the same height, very similar in terms of their body structure, and one takes 25 steps, right? So, for instance, gets to 10 yards in 8 steps in comparison to getting to 10 yards in, a little bit under 7, or sorry, a little bit more than 7, right? So 7 compared to 8 on the first 10, right? And again, here, 12 and a half, right? That's a little bit better spot. And then that's 13. That's 14 steps right there, right? So we're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, right? So we're at 12.5 and 14 on one compared to the other. Now, let's go into, and actually I went a little bit further down, closer to like the 30, is where we went and got a little bit more technical from the numbers, right? So we look at 12.56 when athlete is hitting the ground with the left foot until the right foot's hitting the ground at 12.80, right? So that's going to give us an idea of, and really it should be more of when the athlete's pushing off, so 6.67 to 8.0. So the amount of time spent off the ground is about 1.3, 1.4, which is really good, right? And then we compare that to, again, Darrell Henderson. Let's look at the push off, and this video wasn't great, to be honest with you here. So I think we said 6.7 was the push off. Yeah, 1.67 was the push off. And then landed at 8.0, right? So they're about 6.7, right? So it's in the same like time period, 1314, in terms of time spent off of the ground. I'm going to quickly interrupt this video just to say if you like the information, click that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and let's hop right back into it, right? And then the leg cycle was also similar. So we went from, again, that 0.67, and then, landed with the other foot, right? So we could see the foot's coming off the ground, that left foot's coming off the ground there, and then cycled back through to hit at, I went from 5.6, right? So it was this foot. No, it was 6.7, yeah. So we went from 6.7, and then we cycled all the way through and hit the ground at, about 13.0, right? Maybe a little bit longer, okay? Which would be about 0.33, maybe a little bit higher in terms of turnover rate, right? And that's the real question, is what's more important, turnover rate or the amount of time spent off the ground? And it was similar when we looked to see where, Darrell Henderson was at, right? So we could see he's pushing off the ground. Again, we'll use this step here. He's still pretty, let's go 8.8 on that, right? Because he's pretty far off the ground. To 1.6. Okay, and he is, actually he's a little bit under, right? So he's got a pretty fast turnover rate as well, 0.3. Okay, so he's got a fast turnover rate in comparison to athlete on the right. So there is a separation there, which will help you get down the field faster, right? Is being able to turn over those legs a little bit quicker. I know there's a lot of numbers here. I'm just going to go ahead and clear that out for us here. Let's get another number here. Let's go 2.6, and we'll go and, oh yeah, this one was a weird one because of how it like really froze. I'm going to go with 6.0. Okay, so we're going to go 3.4 on that one. Okay, and that might even not be a good example because of how frozen it ended up getting with the frames. Okay, it might be better to almost get closer to, it might even be closer to 0.3, okay? As we can see here, and then it gets to this frame, and then these frames like all froze, okay? So, yeah, it's probably actually closer to 0.3 on that, and then again, we have 0.33 on the right. So, turnover rate's important, and the reason that I wanted to go and talk more about this, right, because, now that we're getting a better grasp of the difference, because the main difference is this, right, 25 steps in 40 yards in comparison to 21.5 steps, with about the same height. Okay, so that's a huge difference, right? How much overall distance we're covering per step. Okay, so now what gives us the opportunity to be able to cover more distance per step, right? It's the ability to be able to do a couple things. One, we have to be able to strike the ground with a large amount of force. Okay, the ability to strike the ground is critical here. I'm changing the video here now to Trayvon Bromell just because, I did this breakdown here yesterday so we could see what like true sprinting speed, right? True great sprinting mechanics looks like. Okay, and we could see how straight the legs are. Okay, and that allows, so there's two things, right? So one, the foot gets way out in front, and so when you're striking the ground with a lot of force. That's going to be the number one thing that makes it so we can get more distance per step, right? Is that horizontal pull, is how much ground force do we have? Okay, and you don't want to be pushing down. It wants to be horizontal, which means you're pulling back. Okay, but at the end of the day, it's ground force. How much force are we generating into the ground? Okay, number two is how tall are we during that, right? Is height during foot contact. And then number three is going to be leg speed, right? I'm going to just say the overall speed. So that's going to be the turnover, right? Is going to be there. Leg speed. Okay, so it is critical, but it's a part of what makes it so you get more distance per step, right? And because how fast that leg goes is going to make it so then we could be taller and can also make it so we have more ground force. And then I would say number four is going to be time on the ground, right? So those four things are going to determine how much distance per step are we getting, okay? And obviously, if you're 6'3", right, and you being able to get the most out of your 6'3" during, your foot contact is going to be able to optimize how much distance you're going to be able to get in comparison to like if you're 5'8", right? Like you can only be a certain height, right? So this goes into what your height is, which is going to obviously be a big impact on your, distance per step, right? But you can be a taller guy with limited distance per step, right? If you're not able to generate good ground force. Okay, and really it could end up being, leg speed too. You could, if your legs are just really, really slow, it'll make it so then you're not going to be able to get as much, really ground force, but also going to make it so you're not going to be able to get as much distance per step. Right, but if you're shorter, right, so Darrell Henderson getting 21.5 here at 5'8" is really impressive, and the main thing that he's able to do is he's generating a lot of force in the ground, right, and he's turning over his legs quickly. So because he's able to turn over his legs quickly and spending not very much time on the ground, right, so he's optimizing all these things that make it so now he can get a lot more distance. So, what ends up happening is that people hear, oh, I need to increase my distance per step, now I need to reach, right, and this is critical. You don't need to reach, right? In order to increase your distance per step, it isn't this, right? What we're seeing with Trayvon Bromell doing with his left legs. This isn't what gets him to have more distance per step, okay? It's what he does here, okay? This is what makes it so he has more distance per step. And then how fast he gets back off the ground and how his legs end up coming off the ground. Another thing that I see, right, another common mistake, people talk about pushing off the ground. He's not pushing off the ground, right? He's landing. He's generating a lot of force into the ground, he's absorbing quickly, and he's transitioning right back off the ground. It's not a push, it's a transition, okay? It's a toe off, which means it's just a transition. It's not a push. It's not a push off, it's a toe off, okay? Which means that now his momentum is carrying him upwards, which then allows him to be able to reach the leg out in front, right? And then pull that foot back underneath him so then he lands with a lot of force into the ground. Right? It's not that he's landing with his feet way out in front of his hips. You've got to be able to land with your feet underneath your hips. So it's a pull back, your ability to pull your legs back, not your ability to reach out in front, but your ability to pull those feet back underneath. That really makes it so you're able to propel yourself forward and get more distance per step. Now, I didn't do a ton of research into this. I'm going to admit that. But, just by watching this, I did a lot of I did do reading. I did look into what people's opinions are. A lot of people are talking about the importance of distance per step when you look into, what ends up being a key thing. And I agree, right? I think at the end of the day, when I watch people and I get into, like, how can we improve your 100, your 40, your 60, I look at how many steps you're taking and I compare that to what are the best doing? How are the best doing with your height covering that much ground? Right? And most of the time, if the 100-meter times aren't great, it has to do with how many steps they're taking, right? The great guys are taking 47 steps, right? You're taking 51 steps, okay? And so once we can start to isolate that and see that, now it's about how we can improve it, right? And then going back into what I just did with the distance per step ends up being important. And then what we want to be able to do is we want to get into that turnover speed, right? So the turnover speed of the legs, as well as the amount of time that you spend on the ground, right? Having fast foot contact time are two critical components of how much distance per step are we getting, okay? So not that turnover speed is not important. You've got to be able to turn over those legs quickly. And I even think the ability to turn over your legs quickly makes a big impact on how much time you're spending on the ground. Okay, so you can maybe even prioritize turnover speed above foot contact time, but that's a little bit tough, of a debate to be able to get into. But at the end of the day, ground contact time is going to be critical. And if you want to understand more about this, right, and how you can build it, how you can get better at it, right, or what are some of the drills, what are some of the exercises, how are some of the things that we can start doing on a daily basis to be able to help improve the distance per step, I'd check out the description, check out our speed programs, check out some of the things that we have, because this is really when we get into the science of it. How much you squat or how much you deadlift or how high you jump. It's much more about the ability to master your mechanics. What are your mechanics? What are you doing with your feet? What are you doing with your hips? What are you doing with your spine? What are you doing with your arms? How are you maximizing the amount of force that you have within your body? And then once you can understand how well you're able to do that within each part of your body, now we can talk about being able to improve off those numbers, right? Improve your ability to run fast, right? And jump high and all those things that come in. But if you're just doing that just to do it, then you're probably not getting as good of results as if you actually have some coaching behind the mechanics. And that's what we want to do within the program. So check out the programs to be able to get you some more information about how you can run faster and, understanding an exact science of what it is we need to do in order to do that, which is going to be mastering your distance per step. Yes, we're going to be able to improve your turnover. Yes, we're going to be able to improve your foot contact time. Yes, we need to work on your jumping and your, some of your strength exercises. Probably if you need to improve your speed, that's probably something. But there's a lot of guys that I work with that I'm like, we don't need to squat anymore. You have enough squat strength. It's not that, it's mechanics. Spend more time on your mechanics, less time in the weight room. Okay, and I think a lot of guys can benefit from that information just right there. All right, so as always, if you like the information, click that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations, you can go ahead and leave those down below. And as always, thanks for watching.